LinkedIn recently published its Big Ideas 2020 study, which highlights that in the next decade to come, we'll speak more openly about mental health in the workplace. According to the World Health Organization, depression and anxiety alone cost the global economy $1 trillion in lost productivity every year, and 1 in 4 of us will experience mental illness in any 1 year. That's pretty tough for all of us.
In our experience, those statistics are definitely true, and we want to open up the conversation about mental health and well-being. In our travels, we've met many inspiring experts who spend their lives helping people with self-care, nutrition, fitness, and enhancing awareness around mental health and well-being. We found 3 of those experts and interviewed them for this special series.
In this interview, we chat to Emma Walkinshaw, an Aussie lifestyle coach who teaches us how to look for the signs and symptoms of depression and anxiety in ourselves and in others. Here's what you need to know.
I think it's wonderful to open up the conversation around mental illness, whatever it might be, and not to use the word normalising it, but knowing that every single person at some point in life is potentially going to have a moment or two, a week or two, where we have circumstances, events and adversity in life where we may be rocked. Are we unshakable? Not all the time. So knowing that this is circumstantial and I can get out of it, and then sharing with other people so they can give their journey and say, I got through it. It's great people who have come through it to tell a story of hope. Because that's what misses sometimes is there is no hope. Because when you're in it, you actually think you are alone, you're the only one. I'm broken, I'm wrong, I'm less than, I'm worthless, and I'm of no value. So when we talk about it, someone can actually tell you a story of hope or give you reassurance that you will get through it, and this is circumstantial. Even if you can't hear it at the time, at some point, you'll be able to recall on that. When you start to get out of that hole, you'll be able to recall on that and say, I think I'm on the way out. I can see light at the end of the tunnel. So telling a good story as opposed to traumatising ourselves. When we don't share it, we do traumatise ourselves and catastrophise. You know, that's probably the biggest thing that we do when we need to reach out. So I started my working life as a hairdresser, and I believe that's really where I learnt about people. So I would say I did go on and study to be a life coach, but being a hairdresser, I realised people come in all different walks of life, and people are beautiful and they all have a story. And money, circumstances of life have beaten them up. So I realised that my purpose was probably to gain some skills to be able to help them. And there was counsellors and psychologists, which are fabulous. But then to become a life coach was more about where are we at now and where do we want to go. And people I find are probably in 2 different places. You're either at a place where you need some healing, counsellors and psychologists are fabulous. And then other people are, I'm done with talking about it, give me some tools and some skills to move forwards. It is quite unique for each individual, so there's no hard and fast rules, I believe. However, I think isolation is probably a big one, the whole retracting from events and social activity. The other thing would be someone's body language or disposition. It's more of an inward as opposed to an outward. Even if you know someone that's being quite extroverted, they will retract. So that would be another indicator. Also not wanting to be, when you're actually with them, seem like they're a little bit distant and not in the present moment. So you can tell if they're either, or you can't tell if they're in the past or they're in the future, but you can see there's a feeling of worry. And I would say also a little bit of a lack of sense of humour around themselves. They just don't seem themselves. They feel like everything's a little bit serious and sometimes a little bit irritated or short-tempered or quite worrisome. That's what I would say I've experienced.
The question is, how do we reach people when they're going through anxiety and depression if the natural default or instinct is to isolate? So I remember, my father has always said to me that charity starts at home, and I think checking in on family and friends starts at home. Noticing when someone starts to turn down invites. If I look at my own circle,
that have gone through anxiety and depression, that would be a big sign, is you start to notice that isolation and that pullback. So then, you know, moving a little closer and saying, what's going on? How are you going? And then I think the other thing is to not offer to fix them, because they're not broken. You know, it's circumstances, it's situations, it's sometimes life events brings us to a place where we become, I guess, you know, this is my take on anxiety and depression in one shape or form, is we start to catastrophize, traumatize ourselves. And then when you're a friend or a family and you want to reach someone, the last thing you want to hear is that you are doing that. And then it's just that listening, stopping, pausing, not fixing. And, you know, the old classic saying that we say, hold space for someone.
Not when you are having those experiences of feeling anxiety and depression, if it lasts longer than a couple of weeks, you don't feel yourself. You know that this isn't passing, that perhaps there's something underlying and you may need some support, or you definitely need some support, whatever that means for you, whether it be talking to a professional or seeing your GP or turning to a loved one. But if you're not yourself, I think that's definitely, and what I mean by yourself is if you're naturally a jolly, happy person, but you just have a overlying feeling of sadness, that's definitely a sign that you need to ask for help. What do we do if we notice signs in ourselves or others? I guess it's what we do day to day. It's the small things that make a big difference. So if we are not feeling ourselves, and we can feel that hypersensitivity and we are not reacting to circumstances like we usually do, I think it's important to really look at what we're exposing ourselves to. So an example could be if we wake up in the morning and the first thing we do is check our social media, and we get that very gut-sinking feeling, and usually it will go to inferior or superior. So the inferior is not good enough, I feel terrible, you know, everyone else is having this wonderful life, I'm not. And as we know, we believe half what we see on social media, because we can make it very pretty, but everyone's doing life. Or the superior, which isn't also a great place to be, because then we're, you know, essentially looking for evidence to say that I'm better. So I guess, you know, checking in with how do I feel. The other thing I also believe is important to monitor in our own life is who we're spending time with. So we have certain people in our life, and they could be family members, but if we know that we tend to get into a cycle with them, and one of those cycles might be someone you like to spend time with, but every time you get together you tend to gossip. Again, it's not helpful. So if you're having a moment where you're a bit anxious or you're a little bit depressed, that's not going to be a helpful conversation, because you're essentially going down the rabbit hole and the inferior superior comes up again, or just the feelings of talking about things that waste time and energy and don't raise your energy or raise your feelings but dampen them. The other thing is you know, really looking at our nervous system and saying what supports our nervous system and what doesn't. So typically if we are in that anxious state or depressed, we're obviously in fight, flight or freeze. So how do we support to get into our parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest, or our calming place? Coffee sometimes can be great because it makes you feel good, and then other days it's like drinking a cup of worry, and we can feel it in our body. So checking in with your body and going, what do I need today? What's going to support me? Same as alcohol. Sometimes, yes, it's wonderful to be social, but if we're already a little bit compromised, we know that it's potentially going to take away from us, and the next day we're going to feel even worse. So just checking in, how do I feel and what do I need right now? I also think self-awareness and getting to know yourself really well is important, so you can say yes and no to things. So when we are going through anxiety and depression, it's all good and well to talk about it, but often people say, but what can I do? Give me something tangible that I can do. So I often think of the simple philosophy that the Buddhists have, which is impermanence. So impermanence says, yes, you know, everything is fluid and it's moving just like a river around a stream where to move around a rock, but that can be really tricky sometimes when you're in the middle of something to say, well, I get that's impermanent. What about when things are going really well? It's impermanent, it's going to change. So when good times come, appreciate them,
milk them, roll around in them, and then when the bad times come, turn to this too shall pass. So I think knowing impermanence is part of our life, and just bringing yourself back to that when we are going through that struggle and we're saying, but what do I do? Remind yourself it's impermanent. It will move and it will change. And I also think that getting really curious around your own behaviour, raising your awareness is a good thing too. Noticing the things that you can feel gratitude and appreciate, and the things that you say, I'll be glad when this passes. And that's okay, because life is fluid, so it's the backwards and forwards of it. I can really connect to the word appreciate. So if I think when I'm about to eat a meal, I'm not grateful for it, but I can appreciate it. It's just a play on words, and that's one of those things, it's just a personal thing. So I can really appreciate and milk something. Grateful feels a little bit like you just should be grateful, whereas I love appreciation. So that's back to getting to know yourself really well, because often when we go to give people advice, we can trigger them. So I think that's one thing I love about life coaching, is asking someone really smart questions so they arrive at their own answer. Because at the end of the day, as a life coach, I actually don't know what's right for someone. But what I do know is I can ask them some amazing questions, soul-touching questions, that they will arrive at their own answer, and they know best. We know best. I do believe we hold the keys to our own happiness in our pocket, not someone else's. I'm Emma Walkinshaw. I'm a life coach and a yoga instructor, and I have a beautiful yoga studio on the Gold Coast called Yoga in Paradise. We do classes for everyone and also run lots of personal development workshops where we share beautiful tools that help you move from where you are to where you want to be. And our philosophy at Yoga in Paradise is that everyone leaves better than when they arrived. So you'll find us on www.yogainparadise.com.au and also Yoga in Paradise on Facebook. And everyone's welcome. If you're travelling to the Gold Coast or you're from the Gold Coast, everyone's welcome.